Avery Mitchell, 32. When my sister Bethany created that most likely to fail poll in our family group chat, everyone voted for me, even my parents. 6 months later, I'm standing in the conference room of my new company while my family watches from the audience, their faces a mixture of shock and disbelief as I announce our $4 million investment deal. Revenge isn't just sweet. It's necessary when your own blood betrays you. Before I dive into my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. If family drama and sweet karma are your cup of tea, hit that like button and subscribe to join our storytelling family. Trust me, you'll want to stick around to see how I turn my family's betrayal into the ultimate motivation for success. Our family had always been competitive, but I never realized how toxic it truly was until that fateful group chat poll. Growing up in suburban Connecticut, the Mitchell family looked picture perfect from the outside. My father Richard, a successful investment banker, my mother Elizabeth, a former beauty queen turned charity organizer, my older sister Bethany, the golden child who followed in Dad's financial footsteps, and me, Avery, the creative disappointment who pursued art and design instead of business or law. From childhood, the dynamic was clear. Bethany excelled at everything our parents valued: mathematics debate team, internships at prestigious firms. She graduated summa cum laude from Princeton, immediately landed a six-figure job at a top investment firm, married her equally successful college sweetheart, and purchased a brownstone in Boston's elite Beacon Hill neighborhood by 27. Meanwhile, I struggled to find my place. Though I graduated with honors from RISD with a degree in industrial design, my parents viewed my creative career as a hobby, not a profession. "When are you going to get a real job?" became their standard greeting. Each family gathering transformed into an interrogation about my finances, my relationship status, or my wasted potential. Even my small victories like winning a design competition or landing a contract with a mid-size firm were minimized or ignored altogether. "You know, Avery," my mother would say, during holiday dinners, champagne flute delicately poised between manicured fingers, "your cousin Jennifer started as a secretary and now she's an office manager. There's no shame in administrative work if design doesn't pan out." My father was less subtle. "The arts are for people who can afford to be poor," he'd pronounce as though dropping an indisputable truth bomb. Or people with spouses who can support them. Bethany never explicitly joined their criticism, but her silent smirks and occasional "I'm just concerned about you" conversations revealed her true alignment. She'd call me weekly with job listings far outside my field: marketing assistant, executive secretary, retail manager, positions that would provide stability but crush my creative spirit. By my 30th birthday, I'd cycled through several design positions, each ending due to company downsizing, contract limitations, or creative differences with management. Each career setback reinforced my family's narrative that I was the Mitchell failure, the cautionary tale, the example of what happens when you don't follow the approved path. I tried to maintain my dignity and passion despite their doubt. I built a modest freelance client base, supplemented my income with teaching design workshops, and continued developing my own projects after hours. I lived in a small but charming apartment in a less prestigious Boston neighborhood, drove a reliable used car instead of a luxury vehicle, and learned to cook instead of dining at expensive restaurants. My life was humble but honest, or so I thought. What I didn't realize was how much my family's perception of me had calcified into absolute certainty of my inevitable failure. They didn't see my resilience or creativity or work ethic. They only saw deviation from their narrow definition of success. They didn't understand that I was building something sustainable and meaningful, not chasing status symbols and validation. The most painful part was that I still craved their approval. Despite years of subtle and not-so-subtle put-downs, I kept showing up to family events, kept sharing my small victories, kept hoping they might eventually see value in my chosen path. I made excuses for their behavior. Dad was just from a different generation. Mom was raised with certain expectations. Bethany was simply echoing what she'd been taught. When my longtime boyfriend Marcus broke up with me, citing the stress of constantly defending our relationship to my disapproving family, I reached a breaking point. Alone in my apartment, surrounded by half-packed boxes of his belongings, I finally admitted that my family's toxic dynamic had poisoned more than just my self-confidence. It had now cost me the one person who truly supported my dreams. That night, through tears, I made a decision. I would give myself 1 year, one final focused year to prove my worth, not to my family, but to myself. I had a concept for an innovative, sustainable furniture design that could be shipped flat and assembled without tools. I'd been sketching and prototyping for months, but hadn't committed fully. Now I would bet everything on this idea. Little did I know that my family would soon give me the ultimate painful motivation to succeed, and that their casual cruelty would become the catalyst for the most transformative year of my life. It happened on a Sunday morning. I was enjoying my ritual weekend coffee and sketching session when my phone buzzed with notifications from our family group chat. My sister Bethany, riding high after her recent promotion to senior investment manager, had decided to create a poll. Sunday fun: who's most likely to, followed by a series of categories. Most of them were innocent enough. Most likely to oversleep, most likely to forget someone's birthday, most likely to get lost without GPS. The votes were distributed fairly evenly among family members, with good-natured teasing in the comments. I participated reluctantly, knowing these games often ended with me as the punchline. Then came the final category, most likely to fail at their career goals. I stared at my phone in disbelief, coffee growing cold beside me. Surely this crossed a line. Surely someone would call out the cruelty of this question. The responses came quickly. Dad Avery, Mom Avery, sorry honey. Uncle Jim, gotta be Avery. Aunt Patricia Avery, Cousin Jennifer Avery, for sure. Even my grandparents had voted. Every single member of my extended family had selected me without hesitation. And then came Bethany's response. Unanimous decision. Poor Av, but let's be honest, 10 years of finding yourself isn't exactly a career strategy. She'd added a laughing emoji as if publicly humiliating me was hilarious. The conversation continued with others piling on. Remember when she thought she'd sell those weird lamp designs at the craft fair? She came home with almost all of them. At least she's persistent. Most people would have given up on the artist dream by now. Maybe we should start a family fund to help her go back to school for something practical. My hands shook as I scrolled through their messages. This wasn't friendly teasing. This was deliberate cruelty masquerading as concern. The worst part was that no one, not one family member, defended me or suggested the poll was inappropriate. I waited for someone, anyone, to say something kind. Nothing came. Finally, my mother wrote, Avery, honey, we only tease because we care. We just want you to be secure like your sister. I put my phone down and sat in stunned silence. 10 years of pursuing my passion, of working through setbacks, of trying to build something meaningful reduced to a family joke. The people who should have supported me most had collectively declared me a failure. The pain was visceral, like a physical blow to my chest. I'd suspected they thought these things, but seeing it laid bare, seeing the unanimity of their judgment, was devastating. Tears streamed down my face as I realized the depth of their dismissal. After an hour of alternating between sobbing and staring blankly at the wall, I picked up my phone and typed, "Thanks for the vote of confidence. I'll remember this." Then I did something unprecedented. I left the family group chat. I silenced notifications from individual family members. I needed space not to cry or feel sorry for myself, but to transform this pain into purpose. That afternoon, I called my ex-boyfriend Marcus, not to reconcile, but because he'd always believed in my furniture design concept. "I need your honest opinion," I said, voice still raspy from crying. "Is my collapsible furniture design worth pursuing, or am I deluding myself?" Marcus, despite our breakup, was thoughtful. "Avery, it's not just good, it's revolutionary. The problem was never your design skills, it was your confidence. You've let your family's narrow definition of success hold you back from fully committing. His words hit home. For years, I'd been seeking validation from people fundamentally incapable of appreciating my vision. I'd been playing small, keeping one foot in my creative world and one in the conventional world my family respected, satisfying neither. That night, I made three pivotal decisions. First, I would go all in on my furniture design concept. No more hesitation, no more seeking approval. Second, I would keep my plans completely private from my family. No progress updates, no seeking advice, no opportunities for them to undermine my confidence. Third, I would use their dismissal not as a weight to carry, but as fuel for the fire. Every doubt, every dismissive comment, every unanimous vote would propel me forward. The betrayal stung it would for a long time, but as I sat at my drawing table that night, sketching with a new intensity, I felt something unexpected: gratitude. My family had finally shown me exactly who they were and how little I could count on them. That clarity, though painful, was liberating. I no longer needed to waste energy seeking their approval or defending my choices. From now on, I would channel all that energy into proving them wrong. Not for their sake, but for mine. The morning after the pole incident, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The hurt remained a dull ache beneath my ribs, but it was overshadowed by determination. I opened my laptop and created a new document titled Operation Prove Them Wrong, my comprehensive battle plan for the next 6 months. Step 1 was securing funding for my furniture design prototype. Traditional investors would want business experience I didn't have, so I needed an alternative approach. I spent that first week researching sustainable design grants, entrepreneurship competitions, and crowdfunding platforms that specialized in innovative products. I identified 15 potential funding sources and created a meticulous calendar of application deadlines. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed constantly with messages from family members, ranging from confused, "Why did you leave the group chat?" to dismissive, "Avery's being dramatic again," to falsely conciliatory, "We were just joking, you're too sensitive." I read them all but responded to none. Their words only reinforced my resolve. By week 2, I had converted my small second bedroom into a dedicated workshop. I sold furniture I rarely used, creating space for materials and tools. My dining table became my drafting station, covered with precise technical drawings of my modular furniture system. I called it Fold, Functional Organic Lasting Design. The concept was simple but revolutionary: furniture made from sustainable bamboo composite that could be shipped flat assembled without tools in under 5 minutes and was durable enough to last decades. Each piece interlocked using an innovative joint system I'd designed, eliminating the need for hardware or glues. I took a calculated risk and withdrew $5,000 from my modest savings to create professional-grade prototypes. This would either be the best investment I'd ever made or financial suicide. Exactly the kind of irresponsible decision my family would criticize. The thought made me smile as I placed orders for materials. During this time, I maintained minimal contact with my family. I responded to direct messages with brief, uninformative replies. When my mother called asking why I missed Sunday dinner, I simply said I was working on a project. When pressed for details, I became the queen of vague answers. "What kind of project, dear? Just something I'm passionate about." "Is it paying the bills I'm managing?" "Fine, Mom." The less they knew, the less ammunition they had to discourage me. Their imagined concerns and criticism no longer had power over my decisions. By month 2, I had created 3 perfect prototypes: a coffee table, a bookshelf, and a desk. Each piece looked deceptively simple but contained my patented joint system that made them exceptionally strong while remaining elegantly minimal. I hired a professional photographer to capture them from every angle, creating a portfolio that showcased both their aesthetic appeal and functional innovation. With these images, I applied for the Sustainable Design Innovation Grant, a prestigious $50,000 award given to emerging designers with environmentally conscious projects. The application process was grueling, requiring technical specifications, market analysis, manufacturing plans, and environmental impact assessments. I worked through nights and weekends fueled by caffeine and determination. 2 weeks later, I received an email that changed everything. I had made the finalist round. The grant committee wanted to see my prototypes in person and interview me about my vision for the product line. The validation was intoxicating. People who actually understood design, experts in the field, saw value in my work. They got it. But I resisted the urge to share this victory with my family. This wasn't the time for half measures or premature celebration. I needed to go all the way. The grant interview was scheduled for a date that coincided with my parents' anniversary dinner, an annual formal affair at an expensive restaurant where attendance was mandatory. It would be the first family event I'd ever willingly missed. When I called to explain I couldn't attend, my mother was predictably disapproving. "What could possibly be more important than family, Avery? Your father will be so disappointed." I took a deep breath, savoring the moment. I have a business meeting that could change my career. I'm sure you understand prioritizing professional opportunities. You've always encouraged it. The silence on the other end was telling. This was the language they respected, but coming from me, it confused them. My mother recovered quickly. "Well, I suppose we can tell everyone you're unwell. No need to mention you're choosing work over family." "Actually, Mom, feel free to tell them exactly that. I'm choosing my future, just like you taught me." I could almost hear her uncertainty through the phone. This wasn't the Avery they knew. The one who accommodated, who showed up despite their dismissal, who sought their approval. This was someone new. Someone with boundaries and priorities that didn't revolve around their expectations. You know what? I think this is the perfect moment to take a quick break. I've been absolutely blown away by how engaged you all have been with this story so far. If you're feeling that satisfaction of watching someone stand up for themselves after being pushed down for too long, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Are you watching from somewhere where family expectations can feel suffocating? Hit that like button if you're rooting for Avery to prove everyone wrong, and subscribe if you want more stories about sweet, sweet karma coming full and circle. Now let's get back to the turning point in Avery's journey. The day of the grant interview arrived and I prepared meticulously. I wore a tailored charcoal suit with subtle creative touches, handcrafted wooden earrings, and a vibrant emerald silk scarf, projecting professionalism while honoring my artistic identity. I'd rehearsed my presentation until every word flowed naturally, anticipating questions and practicing responses. The committee consisted of 5 industry veterans, 2 furniture designers, an environmental scientist, a business strategist, and a manufacturing expert. They examined my prototypes with critical eyes, testing joints, asking about material sourcing, questioning production, scalability. Miss Mitchell, the lead juror, said after my presentation, "Your joint system is quite innovative." "Have you filed for a patent?" I nodded confidently. "Provisional patent filed last month. The full application is in process." Their impressed glances weren't lost on me. I had done my homework. All of it. This wasn't a hobbyist with a nice idea. This was a designer with a comprehensive vision and the technical knowledge to execute it. After the interview, the committee chair pulled me aside. "We'll announce decisions next week, but I want you to know your presentation was exceptional. Regardless of the outcome, you should be pursuing this. It has tremendous potential." I thanked her, maintaining my composure until I reached my car. Then I let out a scream of joy that had been building for years. Someone who mattered in my industry, someone whose opinion was based on expertise, not family dynamics, believed in my vision. That night, while my family celebrated at their anniversary dinner without me, I drafted a business plan. Even if I didn't win the grant, I would find another way. There was no going back to the old Avery who accepted limitations imposed by others. 1 week later, I received the call. I had won the full grant, $50,000 to develop my furniture line. The committee had been unanimous in their decision. Unanimous! Just like my family's vote declaring me most likely to fail. The irony wasn't lost on me. Two unanimous decisions about my future with dramatically different outlooks. The difference, one came from people who saw only what I hadn't accomplished by their narrow standards. The other from people who recognized what I could create with the right support. With the grant secured, I could move to the next phase, building a business around my design. I hired a small manufacturing team specializing in sustainable materials, contracted a business consultant to help with strategy, and leased a small workshop space. Fold was becoming real. Throughout this process, my family remained largely in the dark. When we did interact, I deflected questions about my work with practiced vagueness. "It's going well" or "I'm making progress" became my standard responses. Their curiosity grew as my confidence did, but I guarded my success jealously. The reveal needed to be perfect, complete, and irrefutable. 4 months after the poll incident, I received another game-changing email. A major sustainable retail chain had seen my prototypes at a design showcase and wanted to discuss a potential partnership. They were launching a new home office collection and believed my desk and shelving units would be perfect centerpieces. The meeting exceeded my wildest expectations. Not only did they want my existing designs, but they also offered a development deal for additional pieces. The initial order would be for 5,000 units with the potential for nationwide distribution if sales met projections. As I signed the contract, I thought about my father's dismissive comments about arts being for people who can afford to be poor. The advance payment alone was more than I'd earned in the previous year. The royalty structure meant potential earnings that would rival Bethany's finance salary. The final piece fell into place when a venture capital firm specializing in sustainable products reached out. They had heard about Fold through industry channels and were interested in discussing investment opportunities. After weeks of negotiation, they offered $4 million in Series A funding to scale production and expand the product line. This was it, the moment I'd been working toward. Not just modest success that my family could minimize or attribute to luck, but undeniable achievement on a scale they would understand. Financial success. Business success. The kind of success that would force them to reconsider every assumption they'd made about me. 6 months after being unanimously voted most likely to fail, I was ready to show my family exactly what failure looked like. With $4 million in venture capital funding, a major retail contract, and the design grant in hand, I was ready to formally launch Fold as a legitimate business. The timing was perfect. My parents' annual 4th of July barbecue was approaching, an event where the entire extended family gathered to celebrate not just the holiday, but also each other's accomplishments. Historically, these gatherings had been showcases for Bethany's achievements, with my parents proudly announcing her latest promotion or bonus, while I sat quietly nursing a beer and deflecting questions about my hobby. This year would be different. I hired a PR consultant who specialized in design startups to help craft the public announcement of Fold's launch and funding round. We scheduled the press release for the morning of the barbecue, ensuring it would hit the business and design news cycles just hours before the family gathering. "Are you sure you want to time it this way?" the PR consultant asked. "Most clients prefer to be present for the initial media response." I smiled. "Trust me, I'll be exactly where I need to be when the news breaks." The week before the launch, I finally updated my professional profiles and website with details of Fold. Within hours, former colleagues and classmates began reaching out with congratulations. Word traveled quickly through my professional network, but I maintained radio silence with my family. Let them be the last to know. The morning of the barbecue, I dressed carefully in a sundress I'd designed and had custom made from sustainable bamboo fabric, the same material used in my furniture line. I accessorized with a simple wooden pendant that showcased my logo, a stylized origami-inspired F that captured the essence of the brand. As I drove to my parents' suburban home, my phone exploded with notifications. The press release had dropped. Design blogs were featuring my story. Business publications were highlighting the substantial investment round as evidence of confidence in sustainable manufacturing. My email filled with interview requests from journalists and industry publications. I parked down the block from my parents' house and took a moment to center myself. This wasn't about gloating or revenge, I reminded myself. This was about reclaiming my narrative and establishing clear boundaries. This was about never again allowing others to define my worth or potential. Walking into the backyard, I spotted the usual scene: my father at the grill, my mother arranging platters, Bethany holding court near the drinks table, regaling cousins with tales of her latest financial triumph. No one immediately noticed my arrival, they rarely did. I greeted a few relatives and accepted a glass of lemonade from an aunt, maintaining calm small talk while waiting for the right moment. It came sooner than expected when Uncle Jim approached with his phone in hand, brow furrowed in confusion. "Avery, is this you?" He showed me his screen, a LinkedIn notification about Forbes' funding announcement featuring my professional headshot. I smiled. "Yes, that's my company." His voice raised in surprise. "Your company got $4 million in funding." This Avery heads turned. Conversations halted. My mother approached, wiping her hands on her apron. "What's going on?" Uncle Jim thrust his phone toward her. "Lizzie, did you know about this? Avery's all over the business news today." My mother's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and something approaching alarm as she scanned the article. "Richard," she called to my father, "come look at this. It says Avery secured major investment funding for some furniture company." The family gathered around as my parents struggled to process the information. Bethany pushed forward, taking the phone and reading aloud. "Innovative designer Avery Mitchell secures $4 million Series A round for sustainable furniture startup Fold, following major retail partnership and prestigious design grant." Her voice trailed off as she continued reading silently, her expression hardening. My father cleared his throat. "Avery, what is this? Why are we hearing about this from Jim's phone instead of from you?" The moment had arrived. I took a deliberate sip of lemonade before responding, savoring the weight of anticipation. "I've been busy building a company. Today we announced our first major funding round and retail partnership. Fold will be in stores nationwide by Christmas." The stunned silence was broken by my cousin Jennifer. "Is that why you've been so quiet lately? You were actually doing all this?" I nodded, maintaining composure though my heart raced. "I've been focused on bringing my vision to life. It's been an intense 6 months." 6 months? My mother's voice was incredulous. "You built all this in 6 months. Why didn't you tell us?" This was the question I'd been waiting for. I looked around at the family circle, at the faces that had collectively deemed me a failure, and spoke clearly so everyone could hear. "The last time I shared something important with this family, you all participated in a poll voting me most likely to fail. Unanimously. I decided to channel that energy into proving every single one of you wrong." The collective intake of breath was audible. My sister's face flushed crimson. My mother's hand flew to her throat. "That was just a silly game," my Aunt Patricia protested weakly. "We didn't mean anything by it, didn't you?" I kept my voice level, because it seemed pretty meaningful when not a single person in this family, not one, thought I could succeed. Not even my parents. I turned to face them directly. "Especially not my parents. I've been absolutely blown away by your support for this story. If you're enjoying Avery's journey from underestimated to unstoppable, drop a like on this video right now. Are you watching from somewhere where people have underestimated you too? I see you and I believe in you." Subscribe to join our storytelling family if you want more tales of sweet justice and personal triumph. Now let's see how Avery's family reacts to her bombshell announcement. My father, always quick to regain control of uncomfortable situations, attempted to pivot. "Well, this is wonderful news. We should celebrate. I always knew you had potential if you applied yourself properly." "Did you?" I raised an eyebrow. "Because I distinctly remember you telling me the arts are for people who can afford to be poor at last Thanksgiving." Right before you asked when I was going to get a real job. He sputtered, caught between wanting to claim credit for my success and unable to deny his previous dismissals. My mother attempted damage control. Honey, we've always supported your creativity. We just worried about your financial security. No, Mom, you supported Bethany. You tolerated me. There's a difference. I set my glass down carefully, but that's actually okay. Because I've learned that I don't need your validation to succeed. In fact, your lack of faith became my greatest motivation. Bethany, recovering from her initial shock, attempted to reassert her position. Well, one funding round doesn't make a sustainable business. Many startups fail in their first year despite initial investment. Have you considered the long-term operational challenges? I smiled at her familiar strategy. When unable to dismiss my achievement outright, she would question its longevity or significance. Our business plan projects profitability within 18 months. We're already cash flow positive on our initial retail orders. The venture capital is for scaling, not survival. But thank you for your concern as always. The subtle emphasis on as always wasn't lost on her. Her concern had never been supportive, it had been undermining. Cousin Jennifer, always quick to align with the prevailing wind, shifted immediately into fawning mode. This is so exciting. I always knew you were talented. Remember when I asked you to help decorate my apartment, I told everyone my cousin was going to be famous someday. I remembered no such conversation but nodded politely. Others joined in, suddenly discovering memories of having always believed in me or known I was special. Throughout the afternoon, family members approached individually, offering congratulations tinged with apologies or explanations for their previous dismissal. Some were genuine, others clearly panicked at the prospect of being excluded from the success story they'd never anticipated. I accepted all with the same measured grace, neither rejecting their overtures nor fully embracing them. My parents oscillated between pride and confusion, wanting to claim some credit for my success while processing the realization that they'd fundamentally misjudged me. My father kept saying Mitchell entrepreneurial spirit runs in the blood, while my mother repeatedly mentioned how she'd always encouraged my creativity by enrolling me in art classes as a child. Bethany maintained a careful distance until late afternoon when she cornered me near the dessert table. Impressive pivot, she said, selecting a brownie with exaggerated care. Though I wonder if you would have pushed yourself this hard without that pole. Maybe we all did you a favor. I laughed genuinely. Is that how you're framing it now? That your cruelty was actually motivational coaching? She shrugged, uncomfortable but unwilling to fully concede. Results speak for themselves. They certainly do. I leaned closer, keeping my voice low. And here's what else they say. I did this without any of you. Not your connections, not your advice, not your encouragement. I succeeded despite this family, not because of it. Her expression hardened, but before she could respond, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen. It was my business partner calling about a potential Japanese distribution deal we'd been negotiating. Excuse me, I said, I need to take this. It's about expanding into Asian markets. I walked away, leaving her standing alone by the dessert table. As I conducted my business call within earshot of various family members, I noticed how they paused their conversations to listen their expressions, a mixture of surprise and newfound respect, as I confidently discussed international supply chains and licensing agreements. By the end of the barbecue, the family dynamic had shifted dramatically. Where I had once been the subject of concerned whispers and pitying glances, I was now the center of attention, the success story they hadn't seen coming. Relatives who had previously avoided career discussions with me now eagerly asked about investment opportunities and whether I could mentor their children. My parents, desperate to reclaim some parental authority, insisted on making a toast before people departed. My father raised his glass with practiced charm. To Avery, who has surprised us all with her ingenuity and determination. While she may have taken an unconventional path, she has certainly proven that the Mitchell drive for excellence lives on in her. Your mother and I couldn't be prouder. I accepted their toast with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. they still didn't get it. This wasn't their victory to claim. They hadn't seen my potential, they had actively dismissed it. Their pride now was not in me, but in the external validation my success provided. As guests began to leave, many hugged me goodbye with newfound warmth. "We should catch up soon," they said. "We want to hear all about your journey." The same people who couldn't be bothered to ask about my work for years suddenly couldn't get enough details. I promised nothing but offered polite, non-committal responses. The bridges they had burned weren't going to be rebuilt in a single afternoon just because the landscape had changed. When only immediate family remained, my mother approached as I gathered my belongings. "Avery, I hope you know we always wanted what was best for you. If we pushed too hard about traditional careers, it was only out of love." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the genuine confusion in her eyes. She truly believed that. After years of undermining my choices and dismissing my passion, she had rewritten history in her mind to cast herself as a supportive parent who had only expressed reasonable concerns. "Mom," I said gently, "I appreciate that you feel that way now, but what I needed wasn't for you to define what was best for me. I needed you to believe I could define that for myself." She blinked rapidly, emotion rising. "Of course we believed in you." "No," I said simply. "You didn't." That poll made it very clear exactly how much faith this family had in me. And that's okay, because I've learned to have faith in myself. That's something no one can take away now. As I drove away from my parents' house, I felt lighter than I had in years. The revenge I'd sought wasn't in their shock or discomfort or sudden respect. It was in my liberation from their opinions. I had proven something crucial not to them but to myself, that their judgment had never been an accurate measure of my potential. The company would continue to grow. There would be challenges and setbacks along with the triumphs. But I would face them on my own terms, free from the weight of familial doubt. I had built something meaningful, and in the process, I had rebuilt myself. In the weeks following the 4th of July barbecue reveal, my family's reaction evolved through distinct phases, much like a grief cycle, except they were mourning the loss of their perceived control over my narrative rather than any actual loss. First came denial. My mother called daily with questions that revealed her underlying disbelief. Did they make a mistake with the amount? 4 million seems like such an unusual figure. Or, are you sure the contract is finalized? Sometimes these things fall through. Each question subtly suggested my success might be exaggerated or temporary. My father took a different approach, attempting to retroactively insert himself into my success story. "You know, your determination comes from my side of the family," he explained during an unexpected visit to my new office space. "Mitchells have always had an entrepreneurial spirit. I remember telling you stories about your great-grandfather's business ventures when you were little. Must have made quite an impression." I smiled politely but offered no confirmation of his revisionist history. He hadn't told those stories. He'd spent my childhood emphasizing corporate stability over entrepreneurial risk. Bethany's denial manifested as technical skepticism. She sent lengthy emails analyzing potential weaknesses in my business model, each concluding with "just trying to help you avoid common startup pitfalls." Her expertise in finance would have been valuable 6 months earlier, before I'd assembled a team of actual experts in sustainable business development. As denial proved unsustainable in the face of Fold's continued success, the family shifted to anger, though it emerged in passive-aggressive forms rather than direct confrontation. "It's interesting you had time to give an interview to Design Monthly but couldn't make it to Cousin Rachel's baby shower," my mother noted during a phone call, her voice tight with disapproval. My father complained to extended family, who promptly reported back to me about my newfound arrogance and how success has changed her and not for the better. Bethany was more direct. During a rare family dinner I attended 3 weeks after the barbecue, she raised her glass in a mock toast to Avery, who's so busy changing the world, she barely has time for the people who supported her through all those struggling years. I clinked my glass against hers, maintaining eye contact. to finding out who truly supports you and who merely tolerates you until you conform to their expectations. The dinner deteriorated from there. Bargaining came next. My parents suddenly offered connections and resources they'd never considered sharing before. My father mentioned board members at his bank who might be interested in sustainable investments. My mother suggested hosting a little gathering to introduce me to her charity committee friends who had significant influence in consumer markets. "We could really help you take this to the next level," my father said, as though my multi-million-dollar funding and national retail contract were merely a promising start that required family intervention to truly succeed. I declined each offer politely but firmly. "Thank you, but we've already assembled our advisory board, or our marketing strategy is actually focused on a different demographic." My consistent refusal to allow them to insert themselves into my business fueled their frustration. They couldn't understand why I wouldn't leverage family connections now that I had something they deemed worthy of their network's attention. Bethany attempted a more direct bargain during a rare moment alone together after a family dinner. "Look, I know the poll thing hurt your feelings, but you've made your point, you're successful, we get it. Can we move past this now?" I studied her face. The sister who had orchestrated my public humiliation now sought to dismiss it as a minor incident, a mere hurt feeling rather than a revealing moment of family dynamics. "I have moved past it," I replied calmly. "That's why I'm succeeding. What I haven't done is forgotten it. There's a difference." "So, what? You're just gonna hold a grudge forever? That's pretty immature for a big-shot CEO. I smiled at her transparent attempt to provoke me. "It's not a grudge, Bethany. It's a boundary. I'm no longer investing energy in seeking approval from people who fundamentally misunderstood and undervalued me. That includes you." Her face flushed. "We're family." "You can't just, I can, just I," interrupted gently. "Being family doesn't grant unlimited access or influence. It has to be earned through respect, mutual respect." She left without further argument, but her expression made it clear she considered my boundaries a temporary rebellion rather than a permanent recalibration. Depression set in, approximately 2 months after the barbecue. Family gatherings became subdued affairs when I attended, which was increasingly rare due to genuine business commitments. My parents stopped their daily calls instead, sending brief formal texts inquiring about my well-being without specific questions about the business. "They're really hurt," my Aunt Patricia informed me during a chance encounter at a local cafe. "Your mother cried at the garden club meeting last week. Said she feels like she's lost her daughter." "I'm not lost," I replied. "I'm just no longer lost." The subtle distinction was lost on her, but it mattered to me. For years, I had been the lost Mitchell, directionless, underachieving, disappointing. Now that I was found purposeful, successful, confident, they experienced it as a loss because it didn't conform to their vision of rescue. They had always imagined my success would come through their intervention, taking their advice, following their prescribed path, acknowledging their superior wisdom. My independent achievement disrupted this narrative, leaving them without a role in my redemption story. The final stage acceptance began emerging around the 5-month mark after my revelation. It started with my youngest cousin Tyler, who approached me at Thanksgiving dinner. "I think what you did was badass," he said bluntly, passing me the cranberry sauce. "Everyone was so busy telling you who to be that they never saw who you actually were. Now they can't ignore it." His simple acknowledgement, free from justification or revisionism, was refreshingly honest. Others gradually followed suit. My Uncle Jim, after several glasses of wine, offered, "I was wrong about you, Avery." We all were. "I'm sorry about that damn poll," mean-spirited nonsense. My grandmother, always the family patriarch despite her diminutive size, took my hand during the dessert course. "You remind me of myself," she said quietly. "I wanted to be a photographer when I was young, but everyone said it wasn't a proper career for a woman. I listened to them." "You didn't? Good for you!" These genuine acknowledgments meant more than any of the performative pride or retroactive support offers. They recognized both the harm done and the strength it took to overcome it. My parents' acceptance came more slowly and imperfectly. My mother eventually stopped trying to insert herself into my business narrative and instead began asking genuine questions about my design process and company culture. My father, less adaptable but not immovable, began clipping articles about Fold from business publications without adding commentary about how I could improve my strategy. Bethany remained the most resistant to the new dynamic. At Christmas, 5 months after the barbecue, she made one final attempt to re-establish her position as the family success story by announcing her consideration of an executive position at a rival investment firm, a substantial promotion that would nearly double her already impressive salary. In the past, such an announcement would have dominated the family conversation for weeks. Now, it received polite congratulations before the discussion returned to my cousin's engagement, my uncle's retirement plans, and yes, Fold's latest retail expansion. Later that evening, I found Bethany alone on the porch, nursing a glass of scotch. Quite a different holiday from last year, I observed, leaning against the railing beside her. She didn't look at me. "You've really changed the game, haven't you? It's not enough to succeed, you had to completely reshape the family dynamic in the process." "The dynamic needed reshaping," I said simply. "It wasn't healthy for anyone, including you." She turned to me, surprise evident in her expression. "What does that mean? Do you know why I never resented you growing up despite the obvious favoritism? Because I could see how much pressure you were under to maintain your perfect daughter status. How exhausting it must have been to constantly perform excellence to meet their expectations. You were as trapped in their narrative as I was, just in a gilded cage rather than a disregarded one." She stared at me for a long moment before looking away. "You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? When was the last time you did something just because it brought you joy, not because it added to your resume, or impressed our parents, or maintained your position? When was the last time you failed at something, and didn't hide it from the family? When was the last time you felt truly free to choose your own path?" Her silence was answer enough. For all her material success and family approval, Bethany had sacrificed authenticity for affirmation. Her cage might be gold-plated, but it remained a cage nonetheless. "I'm not your enemy, Beth," I said softly, using her childhood nickname for the first time in years. "And I didn't succeed to spite you, though I won't pretend your poll wasn't motivating. I succeeded because I finally stopped trying to translate my dreams into a language this family could understand, and instead found people who already spoke my language." She took a long sip of her scotch. "And what if I don't know what my language is anymore?" It was the most vulnerable I'd heard her sound since we were children. The perfect daughter admitting potential imperfection, a crack in the carefully constructed facade. "Then you start listening for it," I suggested. "It's still in there, just buried under years of others' expectations." We stood in companionable silence for several minutes before she spoke again. "I am considering that executive position, but I'm also thinking about starting my own financial consultancy focused on sustainable businesses. Something that would actually mean something, not just moving money around for rich people." I smiled in the darkness. "Sounds like you might be catching a few words of your own language after all." For the first time in our adult lives, we shared a genuine moment of connection, not as competitors in a family hierarchy, but as individuals finding our authentic paths, however different they might be. As I drove home that night, I reflected on the true nature of my revenge. I had intended to prove my family wrong, to force them to acknowledge my success on my terms. What I hadn't anticipated was how this reclamation of my narrative would create space for others to question theirs. My success hadn't just changed my position in the family, it had disrupted the entire system that had kept us all, even the golden child, in rigid, predetermined roles. The most meaningful revenge wasn't making them see me differently. It was creating the possibility for all of us to see ourselves differently. The family poll that had unanimously declared me most likely to fail had ironically unanimously failed to recognize the power of their collective dismissal. In underestimating me so completely, they had inadvertently given me the greatest gift: freedom from the weight of their expectations and the motivation to define success entirely on my own terms. The spring following my Fold launch brought unexpected developments both in my business and my personal transformation. While the company flourished, expanding into new markets and winning design awards, the most profound changes were happening internally. The vengeful determination that had fueled my initial 6-month sprint had evolved into something more sustainable and authentic: genuine passion for my work and confidence in my vision. I no longer needed to prove my worth to my family. I had proven it to myself, which I discovered was far more valuable. This shift became evident during an interview with Design Quarterly. The journalist reviewing my journey asked, "Would you say your family's lack of support was ultimately beneficial, pushing you to succeed out of spite?" 6 months earlier, I would have answered affirmatively without hesitation. Now I pause to consider the complexity of the truth. "Spite is a powerful but limited fuel," I finally replied. "It got the engine started but would have eventually burned me out." What sustained me beyond those initial months wasn't proving others wrong, but discovering how right it felt to fully commit to my own vision. The greatest revelation wasn't that I could succeed despite their doubts, it was that their opinions had never actually defined my potential. This perspective filtered into every aspect of my life. I began reconnecting with old friends I drifted away from during my intense work period, participated in mentor programs for young designers, and even started dating again, this time seeking partners who appreciated my ambition, rather than feeling threatened by it. I also developed a more nuanced view of my family's limitations. While their behavior had been hurtful, I came to understand it as a manifestation of their own fears and narrow definitions of success rather than a deliberate attempt to undermine me. This didn't excuse their actions, but helped me process them without carrying the weight of resentment. This evolution was tested when Fold faced its first significant challenge. Our primary material supplier suffered a catastrophic factory fire, halting production just as we were scaling to meet holiday demand for our retail partnership. With millions in orders at risk and our reputation on the line, the crisis threatened everything we'd built. My immediate instinct was to handle it independently, my pattern when facing obstacles. But as I stared at contingency plans past midnight in my office, I recognized this approach stemmed from the same defensive isolation I'd developed in response to years of family doubt. Always proving I could do it alone had become both strength and limitation. After careful consideration, I made 2 difficult calls the next morning. The first was to our investors and retail partners, transparently explaining the situation and our potential solutions. The second, surprisingly harder, was to my father. Despite our complicated history, he had 4 decades of experience in supply chain management through his banking work. His expertise in navigating business crises could be invaluable if I could separate his professional knowledge from our personal dynamics. "Dad," I said when he answered, "I need your business advice. I'm dealing with a supply chain emergency that could impact Fold significantly." His surprise was audible, but to his credit, he shifted immediately into problem-solving mode. "Tell me the specifics," he said, his tone more colleague than parent. For the next hour, we discussed alternative sourcing strategies, contract negotiations, and crisis communication. He connected me with 2 former clients experienced in sustainable materials manufacturing who proved instrumental in finding emergency suppliers. When we resolved the immediate issues, an awkward silence fell between us. "Thank you," I said sincerely. "This was exactly the expertise I needed." "You're welcome." He paused. "May I say something personal now that the business discussion is concluded?" I tensed but agreed. "I'm proud of you, not because you're successful by conventional metrics, though you are, but because you called me when you needed specific help instead of trying to manage everything alone. That shows more maturity than any business accomplishment." His words caught me off guard. This wasn't the father who had dismissed my career path, or compared me unfavorably to my sister. This was someone seeing me clearly, perhaps for the first time. That means a lot, I said quietly. Your mother and I got it wrong, Avery, he continued, his voice uncharacteristically emotional. We thought we were helping by pushing you toward what had worked for us. We couldn't see that you needed different soil to grow. It wasn't a perfect apology. He still framed their behavior as misguided help rather than harmful judgment, but it was genuine progress. More importantly, I no longer needed a perfect apology to move forward. This incident marked a turning point in my relationship with my family. I began engaging with them selectively, connecting where authentic exchange was possible while maintaining boundaries where old patterns emerged. I shared business updates but didn't seek approval. I attended family functions but didn't pretend past hurts hadn't happened. My sister and I established a new dynamic as well. After her Christmas revelation about considering a career shift, Bethany began consulting me about entrepreneurship. Our conversations were initially awkward, but gradually evolved into a genuine exchange of knowledge, her financial expertise complementing my creative and entrepreneurial experience. 6 months after launching Fold, I realized I had succeeded at something far more challenging than building a multi-million-dollar company. I had reconstructed my sense of self, independent of family validation, while simultaneously creating space for new, healthier relationships with those same family members. The most profound evidence of this transformation came during a conversation with my mother at her garden club's annual charity auction. Fold had donated several pieces for the event, and she had proudly, though still somewhat performatively, introduced me to her friends as my daughter, the CEO. As we stood alone during a quiet moment, she asked, "Are you happy, Avery? Not just successful, but actually happy?" The question surprised me. She had rarely, if ever, inquired about my emotional well-being separate from my achievements or lack thereof. I answered truthfully. Not because everything is perfect, it's not. Running a company is incredibly challenging. But I'm living authentically now. My external life finally matches my internal vision. She nodded slowly. I think I spent so many years worrying about your security that I forgot to consider your fulfillment. She arranged and rearranged her auction paddle nervously. Your father and I had such difficult early years financially. I wanted to spare you that struggle. I understand that came from love, I said. But sometimes the struggle is part of the journey. I needed to find my own way, even if it was harder. You're stronger than I ever realized, she admitted quietly. Stronger than I was at your age. It wasn't a complete reconciliation. Years of dismissal couldn't be erased in a single conversation, but it was a moment of genuine connection, based on who I actually was, rather than who she had wanted me to be. As Fold approached its 1-year anniversary, I found myself in a position I could never have imagined during those painful days following the family poll. My company was thriving with a second round of funding secured and international expansion underway. More importantly, I had developed a solid sense of self-worth that no longer fluctuated based on external validation. The unanimous vote declaring me most likely to fail had become a footnote in my story rather than its defining moment. In the elegant irony that life sometimes provides, their collective doubt had catalyzed my most authentic success, not just professionally, but personally. The ultimate transformation wasn't proving them wrong. It was recognizing that their perception had never been the true measure of my potential and never would be again. 1 year to the day after my sister's infamous poll, I stood at the podium of the National Design Innovation Awards accepting the Breakthrough Entrepreneur honor for Fold. The audience of industry leaders, investors, and fellow designers applauded as I surveyed the room momentarily, overwhelmed by the journey that had brought me here. In the front row sat my team, talented, passionate people who had believed in my vision and helped transform it into reality. Behind them, somewhat surprisingly, sat my family, my parents, sister, grandmother, and a few key extended family members who had made the trip to support me. Their presence represented not a complete healing of past wounds, but a new chapter in our complicated story. We had established a more honest dynamic one that acknowledged past hurts while creating space for new possibilities. This award represents far more than business success, I began my speech. It represents the power of authentic vision and the courage to pursue it especially when others don't yet see its value. I didn't explicitly mention my family, but I caught my sister's knowing smile. She understood the subtext, having been part of my journey from unanimous doubt to industry recognition. Many of us face moments when conventional wisdom suggests we should abandon our path and conform to safer, more established routes. Those moments test not just our determination, but our self-belief. The question becomes, whose vision of your life will you prioritize, others or your own? As I concluded my speech to enthusiastic applause, I felt a sense of completion. The revenge I had initially sought had evolved into something far more meaningful, genuine independence, not just financially but emotionally and psychologically. At the reception afterward, my family approached with congratulations. My father, more reflective since our supply chain crisis collaboration, raised his glass to vision and to the courage to pursue it despite old-fashioned fathers who couldn't see it clearly. My mother, teary-eyed, simply hugged me. "I'm sorry we couldn't see it sooner," she whispered, "but I'm so grateful we get to see it now." Bethany, who had recently launched her own sustainable finance consultancy, clinked her glass against mine. "Who would have thought my mean-spirited pull would lead to all this?" she said wryly. "Maybe I deserve partial credit." I laughed genuinely. Let's call it an unintentional catalyst. Later that evening, I found a quiet moment alone on the venue's balcony, reflecting on the year's journey. My thoughts were interrupted by an incoming email notification, a journalist requesting an interview about overcoming family doubt to achieve entrepreneurial success. The request highlighted how easily my story could be reduced to a simple revenge narrative: undermined daughter proves family wrong. While technically accurate, this framing missed the deeper truth of what had happened. Yes, I had proven them wrong, but more importantly, I had proven myself right. The distinction was crucial. One was reactive, keeping me tethered to their judgment even in opposition. The other was proactive, centered in my own vision regardless of their response. I declined the interview request. My story wasn't primarily about family redemption or revenge, it was about personal reclamation. The most significant victory wasn't making my family see my worth, it was no longer needing them to see it for me to know it myself. As I looked out over the city lights, I thought about that fateful poll and how differently I viewed it now. What had once been a crushing betrayal had ultimately become a clarifying moment that forced me to confront the dynamics that had limited me. Sometimes illumination comes from the harshest light. The unanimous vote declaring me most likely to fail had proven unanimously wrong. But the true success wasn't in proving the poll wrong, it was in discovering that my definition of success had never required their approval in the first place. I thought back to something my grandmother had said at Thanksgiving. "You remind me of myself. I wanted to be a photographer when I was young, but everyone said it wasn't a proper career for a woman. I listened to them." "You didn't! Good for you." Her words had stayed with me, highlighting how easily we surrender our authentic paths to others' limited visions. How many dreams remain unrealized because we give others' doubts more authority than our own conviction? In that moment, I made a decision about Fold's future direction. Beyond creating beautiful, sustainable furniture, we would launch a mentorship program for unconventional creative entrepreneurs, people whose visions didn't fit neatly into established categories but held genuine innovation potential. The program would provide what I had lacked: not just funding, but validation, practical guidance, and community. A space where unexpected ideas could flourish without being prematurely dismissed by those too conventional to recognize their value. This felt like the perfect resolution to my journey, transforming my personal redemption into opportunity for others facing similar doubt. The unanimous vote that had once wounded me would now fuel an ecosystem supporting those whose potential others couldn't yet see. As I returned to the reception, I caught sight of my family engaged in animated conversation with my business partners. They were no longer central to my story, but they weren't villains either, just imperfect people who had acted from their own limitations. We were writing a new story now, one with more nuance and mutual respect. The unanimous vote declaring me most likely to fail had indeed changed my life, just not in the way anyone had expected. In trying to define me by their limited perception, my family had inadvertently set me free to define myself. And that was a victory far sweeter than revenge. Wow, I can't believe we've reached the end of this journey together. If my story of family betrayal and sweet justice resonated with you, I'd love to know in the comments below. Have you ever been underestimated by the people who should have believed in you the most? Or have you witnessed karma come full circle in your own life? Please hit that like button if you enjoyed this tale of transformation, and subscribe to my channel for more stories about overcoming obstacles and finding your true worth. Share this video with someone who might need a reminder that other people's opinions don't define your potential. Thank you so much for listening to my family revenge story and the valuable life lessons it taught me. Remember, sometimes the people who don't believe in you are the ones who push you to prove just how powerful you truly are. Until next time.